Hi, this is Karin Zissis with ASCOA Online. Today, we're back with the latest episode in our 2024 election series, and this time, we're talking about Panama. If you glance at headlines about Panama over the past year, you'll read about massive protests, unprecedented drought, and an unpopular president. A recent poll reported that 83% of Panamanians are dissatisfied with their democracy.
Esta asamblea y el gobierno que controla el país no ha querido escuchar el clamor del pueblo panameño que sigue diciendo que Panamá no es un país.
But if you look at economic indicators, a different picture emerges. Panama remains one of the region's most dependable economic performers. Its growth is solid and its credit rating, despite the strife of 2023, hasn't been downgraded. The dissonance between Panama on paper and Panama on the streets may define the upcoming May 5th election, as will a crowded field. There are 8 candidates in the race, and 6 have polled in the double digits. Given that there's no runoff, a candidate could win the election with a relatively small portion of the votes and a weak mandate. On top of that, the frontrunner and former president, Ricardo Martinelli, was eliminated from the competition after a money laundering conviction. His stand-in, Jose Raul Molino, leads polls. Whoever wins will be tasked with addressing the causes for the public's dissatisfaction. There's uncertainty around the future of mining operations in the country after Canadian company First Quantum saw operations at one of its mines suspended. There's concern about how drought conditions are affecting the Panama Canal. There's worry that the National Pension and Healthcare Fund system is running out of money. And then there's Panama's role as a transit point for migrants, nearly 500,000 of whom passed through the Darien Gap last year.
The most important things are who's going to be elected president, what are the fiscal plans, what are the economic plans, and who's going to be the team that's going to be with that president.
That's Felipe Chapman, president and managing partner of INDESA, a Panamanian economic and financial advisory firm. He spoke with ASCOA Vice President Randy Melzi about what the next president could do about the economy and how to make sense of that crowded electoral field.
Well, so as they say, it ain't over till it's over, and he may run.
If you're trying to keep up on Latin America's elections this year, check ASCOA Online's election guide at as-coa.org/2024. You'll find all the episodes of this Latin American Focus special series, such as our conversations about the youth vote in Mexico or Nayib Bukele's global reach, as well as poll trackers and explainers about races taking place across the region this year. Share this episode with other election aficionados and help us spread the word. Rate our show, write us a review, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you hear every episode.
You're listening to Latin America in Focus.
Latinoamérica en Foco.
América Latina em Foco.
A podcast by America Society, Council of the Americas on politics, economics, and culture in the region.
Felipe, we're delighted to welcome you to Latin America in Focus. When I told friends in Panama we were going to be doing this, everybody said, wow, Felipe, he's the best.
Oh, thank you.
So in the past few months, we've seen significant international press coverage about how the unprecedented drought has affected the number of ships transiting through the Panama Canal. The protests against Minera Panama last year resulted in an adverse ruling against First Quantum, and the country's investment grade rating is at risk. The Caja de Seguro Social is running out of money. Migrants passing through the Darien jungle are now around 500,000. And we have elections in Panama on May 5th. So where do we start? Ricardo Martinelli cannot run, but Jose Raul Mulino, his candidate, is polling way ahead of the three closest competitors, which Panamanian press calls the triplets because people in Panama have a wonderful sense of humor. So can you tell us who Jose Raul Mulino is?
Yes, sure. Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure. First of all, you mentioned the polls. Actually, there's been only one poll with the numbers you mentioned published by La Prensa. But there are other informal polls going around with different numbers. So I would take that the result of that poll with a grain of salt. Probably it's the indication of one particular moment where a picture was taken. So I would be not surprised to see different numbers in the next in other polls, and actually including La Prensa's next poll, which is going to be, I believe, in early April. Definitely, all polls that I've seen are anticipating a very tight race. The only one that really has some wider numbers, at least as of today, is La Prensa. So, as I said, it's a bit too early. The jury's still out, deliberating. So it's a bit early for that. Jose Raul Molino is a lawyer. He should be about mid to late 60s. He's been in politics for a long time. He was part of La Cruzada Civilista back in the 80s, which was a private sector, a very big movement against the dictatorship. And after the US invasion of Panama, when former President Guillermo Endara was able to take position as president, and he won a landslide election in 1989, Mulino became part of his cabinet. He was a vice minister of foreign affairs. And after his boss or the minister died unexpectedly, he became the minister for a shorter time. After that, he was active in party politics, but not as part of a government until Ricardo Martinelli was elected in 2009, where he became part of his cabinet. He was chosen as Ricardo Martinelli vice president when Martinelli actually was chosen in a primary election within his party. The vice president doesn't have to get elected, he's designated by the running candidate. And since Martinelli was not allowed to run given his conviction for money laundering, and it's very, very clear in the Constitution that he's forbidden then to run for president and to be president. Then the Electoral Tribunal, which is the court that interprets electoral legislation, concluded that Molino could replace Martinelli in that ticket. But as of today, there's a controversy going on in the country where you have, as you know, you can have 5 lawyers in a room and you can have 100 interpretations. Well, this is one of those, where you have some constitutional experts saying that the Supreme Court does have the empowerment to make a judgment on whether Molino can be in the ticket for election. And the argument is that since he did not go through a primary election, I understand that's the legal technicality in question. On the other hand, some other lawyers have the position that the Supreme Court doesn't have the last word on that, and it should be the Electoral Tribunal. So right now, there's that controversy going on as we speak. So may we live in interesting time, never a dull moment.
Well, so as they say, it ain't over till it's over, and he may run and he may not run, and we'll stay tuned for the polls and see how the triplets do.
That's correct.
You've been following the election, and I'm sure you've been following all of the debates that have been had. And what are the plans that the candidates are putting forth for consideration by the electorate?
That's quite interesting because the main problems or the main things that worry Panamanians are well known. And if not all, overwhelmingly, most of the candidates are addressing those issues. The interesting thing is that nobody's denying or ignoring the major problems that we face. All of them talk about them, somehow propose some ideas, and nobody's actually first anti-system, if I can use that word. There's a lot of difficulty in terms of differentiating the proposals. So at the end, the voters are probably going to say, whom do I believe? They're not saying something extremely different to address the issue of water, to give you an idea, or employment. So at the end is, who do I trust more? Who do I think has a probability of actually doing? Who has more commitment? And at the end is basically convincing the voters that who's going to be able to carry those proposals and make them true. No.
So we'll see who wins and who's the candidate that convinces the electorate to vote for them. Because as you said, it's going to be close, so it'll be fascinating to watch the race. So Felipe, Panama, as we know, has been among the top 3 most rapidly growing countries in Latin America in the past decade. What is your outlook for growth for Panama this year? How are Panamanians feeling about the economy, and will they vote their pockets?
Well, the Panamanian economy, it's a success story. In the past 30 years, Panama, let's think about a horse race. Panama was in the last part of the pack, and getting close to the end of the run, we are first in the pack. Actually, when you do the calculation of the size of the economy per inhabitant, per person, Panama, in terms of purchasing power parity, is the number 1 in Latin America, followed by Chile, Uruguay, and then Costa Rica. So it's a great story to know. And in the past 33 years, we have only 1 year of economic contraction, which was during the pandemic. 2020 has been one of the worst years from a human point of view and economic point of view in Panamanian history. The economy contracted 17%. But still, at the end of 2022, the economy was already the size before the pandemic. After that contraction of 17, Panama grew 15, 10, and a little bit more of 7%, which has been a great track record. Now we're expecting an important cool down this year, given 2 factors. Typically, electoral years, the economy cools down, so we're expecting that. And the unexpected element was the mine, that the mine is ceasing operations. And we are anticipating that at least in 2024, there's going to be no operation of the mine. So you have to extract that from the pie of the size of the economy. It could be around 4 points of the economy. So just giving that, imagine that the economy is 100, just extract 4 points, you are starting at 96. Even though we were anticipating to grow above 4% before the event of the mine, the conclusion would be that we'd be growing around 1.5%, especially given the mine issue. Next year, 25, that's out of the question because that's a 1 year, one-time event. So even if the mine doesn't operate going forward, we are expecting an acceleration of economic growth starting in 25 and so on. And if we have a government with a clear vision, a good plan to put forward, probably that growth can be even higher.
Well, that would be fabulous because Panama is extraordinary the way it has grown for so many years. And where does the first quantum issue stand now? Is the decision to close it reversible? It seems to me that what started out as an environmental protest became a referendum on the government. And from at least the Prensa poll or our own poll tracker, it seems that corruption is an issue that's on people's minds. And finally, because I was a banker for many years and I did learn to model on mining companies, I know that mining projects have a lot of due diligence, and today there's environmental and social due diligence. And did it all get out of hand? Was there no due diligence? What can you tell us about this?
It's a fascinating topic. I would start by saying never say never in terms of what comes in the future. What can we expect? But if the decision were to be made today, still the public sentiment would be not to have a mine. I don't know if that's going to change in a year or 2 years or more. That's why I'm saying never say never. And just to give you an example, when we decided to expand the Panama Canal, we went to a referendum. That project was overstudied. I mean, think of anything that you would study and analyze it, it was there. So we as citizens had all the information to make a judgment. And actually, there were people, and they were in their legitimate right to vote against the expansion. And that was 22% of the voters. That is 78% of the people voted for the expansion, which happened to be such a great event that was what triggered the acceleration of growth that we have seen in the last 15 years. That market signal. There's a before and after the referendum of the canal. It really was a trigger for private investment and consumption, besides the investments of the government, public investments. In the case of the mine, there was nothing remotely, not even close done to the canal. Why? I don't really understand it. If it had been my decision, I would have done the same. And I would have educated as much as possible the citizens and the country to really make a decision on the mine itself, not on corruption, not on performance of a government, not on so many other issues, but really concentrated on the mine, on the operation, in the sustainability or not, environmentally speaking, of the potential economic benefits, and if the benefits really are larger than the costs, which come in every single project. That we don't even know today. We haven't seen the scientific data to have that proper discussion. So right now, it's a completely emotional debate, not based on facts, which is a pity. When the temperature drops, is there going to be an opportunity to redo it again, do it well, and restudy the topic and discuss it with facts? I don't know. Hopefully, but I don't know. It's too early to tell. It's clear that this government has run out of political capital to do anything about it. So it's gone. So it would be either the next government or the next one to that one. As of today, I understand that First Quantum initiated the arbitration process. There's a cooling period, which is interesting and makes sense, of about 6 months to drop the temperature, I guess, among the parties in conflict. So actually, it would be the next government who would have to face the arbitration.
So there's tremendous upside, but we all know that we need copper in order to have an energy transition, and there are successful mining operations and stories in countries such as the Dominican Republic and Guatemala. But I guess time will tell and we shall see. But the issue with First Quantum is that markets are worried that Panama will lose its investment grade rating. Yeah. Because the money that was coming from First Quantum in terms of royalties, which was $350 million a year, they won't get. So how do you feel about Panama losing its investment grade rating as a result of this?
First of all, one of the things that we're going to have to really study if it's environmentally sustainable to do an open mining operation in the tropical humid forest where that mine operates. And that's something that has to be technically demonstrated. That's key. That's key. And if you do that, then the probability of this going forward increases. Otherwise, it would probably be dead. Okay, going to investment grade, yes, people have associated a lot, probably exceedingly, the case of the mine with the credit rating. In terms of credit rating, I would assign a lot more weight to public finances.
Okay.
And how have they developed way before the mine issue. In the pandemic, the government increased the level of debt tremendously, as we had never seen before. And after the pandemic, the plan to come back to a previous level of indebtedness have not taken place. For me, that I assign a lot more weight to that than to the mine in terms of the big numbers. Just to give you an idea, yes, the mine was about to provide about 375 million, but to give you an idea, the canal has a potential to provide 10 times that. So we're talking about the big numbers. I'm not saying it's not an important number, it is. But if you don't have the resources of the canal, Houston, we have a real problem. The mine, when we didn't have a mine, we had investment grade. And we could sustain the finances, yet we didn't have the level of debt that came with the pandemic. So we have to see the complete picture. So obviously, the event of the mine doesn't help, but I don't think it's the trigger if and when we lose the investment grade. Probably the most important things are who's going to be elected president, what are the fiscal plans, what are the economic plans, and who's going to be the team that's going to be with that president. And that's why probably the rating agencies, as of today, after months of the event of the mine, have not changed the rating, even though the markets have discounted that.
Right.
So what I'm reading from the rating agencies, and they haven't told me this, my reading between the lines is we're going to wait and see. And if in 6 months down the road, we don't like what we're seeing in terms of the thinking of the new president, the team, and its plans, then we move forward. That's what I foresee.
Good. So it's good to know that the rating doesn't hinge on the future of the mine. And going over to talk about the Panama Canal, because the Panama Canal is responsible for 5% of the country's GDP. And there are some projects underway to improve the amount of water that the canal has. And just this week, the Panama Canal Authority announced an $8.5 billion project. Could you talk to us a little bit about what this encompasses? Is this a plan that has to be approved by the incoming administration, or does the Panama Canal Authority have full authority, no pun intended, to approve this? And full disclosure, I'm a Soneíta. I grew up in the canal, so this is near and dear to my heart.
All right. So I have to be very careful what I tell you.
No, because my grandmother was a Santeña, so I'm, 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Great. Awesome combination. All right. 5% of GDP, but more like 20 cents per every dollar for the government, which is even more important. Let's not forget that. Good news, I think there is plenty of awareness that we have a problem and that we have an issue, not just for the canal, also for human consumption. So something must be done. I think that there's plenty aware of that, which is a good news. And my take is that something's going to happen. The Panama Canal Authority can do so much within itself. It cannot expand the Cuenca Hidrográfica, its basin. It's restricted by law. So to do activities further from its area, from its basin, it has to change the law. So it would have to go, if it's an initiative by the Panama Canal Authority through the executive power to take it to Congress, they would have to approve a project within the cabinet, then take it to the assembly, and the assembly would have to approve it. I would assign high levels of probability of that happening. The potential solutions have been clearly identified. It's a question of willingness to do it and to have the political energy and ability to get it done.
So we hope that the next administration will play ball with the Panama Canal Authority. And in preparing for this podcast, I learned something that was astonishing. 40% of the water in the system in Panama is unaccounted for. So that's something else that needs immediate attention. And the cost of water is very low, and a lot of it, I guess, is stolen or it just leaks. So that is something else to focus on.
It's one of the countries with most water in the world.
I know.
So the good news is that it can be solved.
Absolutely. All it takes is political will and a lot of human capital.
They cannot ignore it anymore. They have to do it no matter what.
Felipe, another problem that nobody can ignore anymore is the Caja de Seguro Social. This has been a ticking time bomb for quite a few years. I have friends who have worked for the Panamanian government. They're worried about their pensions. I'm reading that the system won't have any money come 2025. How dire is the situation? What are the solutions? Is this a political problem? Is this an economic problem? It's very local.
It's fiscal, more than economic, public finances, and political. Tell your friends not to lose sleep over that.
Good.
Because we, younger taxpayers, are surely going to take care of that. Somebody has to pay. I guarantee you almost 100% that not a single pensioner is not gonna get their money. What we saw in the protest with the mine would be nothing compared with what would happen if that ever takes place, and we all know that. So the elephant in the room has to be taken care of. There's no way out of it.
Felipe, what advice would you give the new government if they were to ask you? And they probably have already, because I'm sure you're talking to all of them.
If they were going to ask me, I would tell them, well, first give me a lot of time to give you some of my ideas. First of all, I would prioritize. I would say there are 100 pressing issues in the country. You cannot handle them or you can address them within 5 years. You have to pick the most pressing ones and really invest all of your time and energy to address those, including all the ones we have already talked about, including water. And water not just for the canal, for the people.
Yep.
Exactly. And other pressing issues, which are fiscal for the country. We talked about related to the cost of financing, which comes in hand with the credit rating, which is cost of financing for the government, for banks, for companies, and for people. Because obviously lower interest rates produce more consumption and investment. And I will address all other issues such as medicines. That's Caja de Seguro Social. 80% of the population in Panama gets their medicines from the public sector.
That's right. Some unbelievable.
And it's not a problem not having the money. It's simply management. It's fixable. Obviously, medical attention, education is key. We haven't really made major changes in education in the past 50 years. It's long overdue. So I would concentrate on probably very few challenges. And once those are up and running, I would probably see the next level of problems or challenges that come. No? Within the first ones, you need to transparency, corruption, to regain trust. People need to trust their government. That's important. So I would go down a list, and hopefully, if out of 10 things they do 3, I'll be satisfied.
Well, we hope that they do 5 of the things that you're recommending, and trust is very, very important. What have I not asked you that you would like to share with our audience before we close?
I'm very optimistic about Panama. Panama, it's a gem that hasn't been exploited. Just to give you an idea, tourism actually generates more foreign income or divisas than the canal, and we haven't done anything to promote it. Imagine the potential. Just to give you one idea. In terms of our geographical position, we are way, way beyond what the potential we can do. The canal was expanded not as an end, but as a means to do a lot of things that we haven't done yet. Look about nearshoring that the US is talking so much about. The opportunities there are tremendous. in agriculture, where we are also with very low levels of productivity. Look at the story of specialty coffees.
Yeah.
You find coffees sold in Asia, in the Middle East, of Panama, for amounts that you and I would never think about buying a cup of coffee for $100.
Nope.
So, but people are willing to pay that. It's so precious, so valuable. Just to give you an idea, I mean, the potential is enormous. So in that sense, I'm quite optimistic about the future. I mean, we don't have those problems. I say that problem is not fixable. It's just willingness. Sit down. Let's reach agreements and let's do it.
Political will and dialogue.
Exactly.
I share your views. I'm optimistic also. It's a fabulous country, and I thank you for your time today and your very valuable opinions, and we will stay posted. We will follow the next poll, and may the best candidate win. And we look forward to visiting you in Panama. A lot of our members have operations in Panama, so un millón de gracias, Felipe. Fabulous.
It would be my pleasure.
Gracias.
Con mucho gusto.
Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Karin Zissis. This episode was produced by our executive producer, Luisa Lemy. Throughout the year, get content on Latin America's election through our guide at as-coa.org/2024. The music in this podcast was Cadenza con Pajarillo, performed by Eddie Marcano and Trio Acústico for America Society. Find out about upcoming concerts at musicoftheamericas.org. You can access other episodes of Latin American Focus at www.as-coa.org/podcast and send us feedback at latamfocus@as-coa.org. Share and subscribe at Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of America Society, Council of the Americas, or its members. Thank you.